welcome to Them's Writing Words, a podcast discussing selected fanfictions from the world of pastel horse literature. My name is Scribbler, and I will be your moderator today. Although we do actually have the proper moderator back, Return of the King. Hi, my Neighrator. Joining me for this discussion, we have Clever Hooves.
Howdy, y'all.
Illya Leonov.
Hello, everyone.
Neighrator Pone.
Good morning.
Skywriter.
Pleasure to be here as always.
Returning from the depths of 2 years ago, Midori.
Obligatory phallic symbol.
What the That threw me off my groove before I could say, and welcome to our newest member who might be regretting her choices right now, Midnight29.
Hello!
Right. Wow, what the fuck, Midori? Holy shit. You got sassy in your absence.
I've gotten used to whenever I'm recording a D&D session, one of the others will scream out, the P word. And I'm just like, I've been warped by it.
I mean, you're in the right place then. So today we're looking at the fanfic Soul Marked by Ping Zing, as chosen by me. The synopsis reads, a soulmate is a rare and precious gift. Usually. Celestia isn't so sure about hers. The story was published on June 9th, 2020, and clocks in at 12,421 words. So, for the benefits of those who are tuning in with us for the first time, the first part of this podcast will be spoiler-free. We will indicate when the spoilers kick in so that you can go and read the fic before you join us. There is no fic reading for this one on YouTube, I believe, so it is all in the traditional reading sense. So, to begin with, tags. Do we believe they are accurate? The only tags on here are romance and drama. And I'm going to start with Skywriter.
Romance, obviously, this is a ship fic from the ground up. As far as drama, I'm on the fence. Dramatic events take place, but does it cross the line into drama? I think it's sort of, without going into too many spoilers, there's a lot of there's some mid-game and late-game reveals that sort of wash the drama out of it, so it sort of becomes just a straight-up romance ship fic. So I'm not sure about drama myself. Romance, obviously.
Neighrator Pony?
Yeah, more romance than drama, I'd say. But depending on your definition, drama could literally be any fic.
That's true. Midori?
I feel that if a story has a very pivotal and important moment that can pertain to something like drama, then yes, drama is appropriate, and it's important to have that in there just in case somebody doesn't want even a sliver of drama in there. So I feel the tags are appropriate in this case.
Midnight?
I'd have to agree, yeah. Seem appropriate. I don't know what other tags you'd add, but yeah, they seem okay, yeah.
Illya?
I actually don't really see the romance in this thing.
Ooh, controversial.
Maybe there's some hidden romance or implied romance, but not real romance. I did see what I consider to be a good bit of drama, especially during the violent parts.
And Clever?
As usual, I kind of agree with Illya. I feel like it could turn into romance, but as the story as it is, I don't think we've quite gotten there exactly. The end is, I get why people could lean that way, absolutely. And because the author has tagged it as romance, we're supposed to go along with the ride, I guess. But if that tag hadn't been there, I think it would be a little bit ambiguous and left up to the reader. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I'm not a big tags person, so I'm not entirely certain if there is another tag that would be as appropriate or not. If it is a romance, I'd almost call it a crack ship.
I mean, I get the feeling from just TV tropesdom that you're leaning toward your mileage may vary on the romance and drama.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, like if you're looking for a romance and your stereotypical idea of what romance could entail, I'm not quite sure this quite gets there exactly. But again, if someone tells you in advance that this is romantic, then you kind of interpret everything with a bit of a different lens. So yeah, your mileage may vary.
Okay. So I will give a brief rundown of this story, spoiler-free version, and then we'll go into characterization, go into just our general opinions of the story. In its barest sense, there is a plot conceit in this story whereby everybody is born with a small mark on them that has wording only one other creature in the world can read. It is words you will say the moment that you meet your soulmate, and only your soulmate will know what they are. Clever, go on.
Just a point of verification, apparently it's only 0.5%, not everyone.
Not even 0.5%, 0.5%. It's a very, very rare if somebody is born with this. Like in any given community, you'd find 1 or 2 people maximum.
Wow, I got into a podcast with mathematicians. I'm fucked.
Well, it said it right at the beginning.
It was right at the beginning.
Like
Everyone picked up on that but you.
Point out, I have dyscalculia. Numbers are hard. Going forwards, apparently 0.05% or whatever the fuck it was. Anyway, the point is, only your other soulmate can read this bit of writing that's on you, and nobody else can read it, and it's something you said the moment that you meet them. And Celestia's got one. And that's as much as I can say at this point, actually, without going into wholesale spoilers. Wow. You guys have really thrown me off my game. Thanks.
Yes, it's our fault.
Introducing fucking numbers and...
How dare we use a decimal?
I still love
How
you,
dare
Scribbler.
you just use any kind of figures and facts and making me verify myself, and thank you, Midori.
Numbers are forbidden in Ponyville.
Numbers are dark magic.
I mean, I can just imagine that being a thing that Scribbler Pone would say.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly
Mathemagic.
imagine it as pinky propaganda.
Pinky gander. Anyhoodle. Characterization of these, well, the 3 main characters. Celestia, Chrysalis, and Luna.
Now people have to wonder, who's the ship between?
I realised, nope, sorry. I'm wrong. I'm going to edit that out because I'm looking at the wrong fucking point. I actually genuinely have been completely thrown off. No, it's just general opinions of the story. My bad. Sorry. I will edit all of this out. I'm usually more professional. No, I'm not. There we go.
No, we're not.
So we're going from the top then. Clever. Your general impressions of this story.
I liked it. Tags aside, I thought it was very interesting to explore the possibility of trying to create a relationship between people who we won't name. I from the outset, I was like, how is this going to work? How are we going to make this so that it makes sense without it just being, on crack? And I felt it actually did a fairly good job of trying to put these 2 characters into a position where we could, as a reader, believe that they might interact and start to potentially not just try to destroy each other. And I like that. And I like that. I really like the preface, the very beginning, because it presents itself as a very piece of academic writing, just the preface, not the rest of the story. And I felt they did a really good job of writing in that style. So I like this story. I would like to see it continued, to be honest.
Illya?
This story was a lot of fun. I've noticed that lately when I'm describing a story and my relationship to it, I'll always talk about the writing and how beautiful it was and how it pulled me in and everything. This one wasn't like that. This was just a fun story. I mean, it kind of grabbed me from the the excerpt from some philosopher's notes or whatever it was. From that very moment, all through the story, it had my attention. I never got bored. I really loved it.
Midnight?
I admit the prefix very beginning part confused me at first, and I went searching for the beginning of the book. So that admittedly confused me. But overall, I enjoyed the story, and I agree. I think it's a good beginning. They could continue it, because I'd be curious to see how it all ends up in the end. Whereas it kind of felt like I was left at the end of the first chapter situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, feels slightly unfinished by the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll go with that. But we will get into that later, because that is actually a point I want to make as well.
Sorry.
No, by all means, it's fine. It's just telling our readers, there are some narrative issues, which we're going to get into. Midori?
I will admit I was expecting it to be a little bit more lovey-dovey and calm going through, but it wasn't a bad thing that the conflict happened when it did. It was actually quite interesting to see how things played out, and overall I appreciate that it deviated from what the show did, rather than trying to portray itself as being something that could be going on alongside with the show. That's not something that's necessary with a fanfic, and I was happy when it broke away from that kind of formula. I enjoyed it in the end.
Neighrator?
It was a fun little fic, but I think we could have used more. Like a lot of others have said, I'm glad I'm not alone in this. I think I was expecting more. I wanted more, and it ended very suddenly. The fic had to, the one fight scene ended up having to do a lot of heavy lifting to advance the story, and it all felt a bit rushed to me. But otherwise, pretty fun and cute.
And Skywriter?
I'm going to echo what some of these have been saying. I mean, I think that it is an infectious story. It feels like the author is just really having fun with putting down they wanted to see some scenes with their principles, and they just had a blast doing it, writing these things out. I mean, I thought that was infectious. I have some issues with it. Again, I think like a lot of people, I think they kind of stopped the story when it, right when they had run out of the ideas that they had decided that were cool, and that was sort of the end, and everybody left everybody wanting more. I think it's a strange story. It sort of shoots itself in the foot in a couple times. It's a dramatic story that deliberately takes the position of trying to remove drama from itself, to throw water on those fires at multiple occasions in the story, which is a mediating technique that I think maybe doesn't serve for the sort of heights of emotion they're trying to do. It's a romance fic, but there's very little, as we pointed out in the intro, there's very little romance going on here, which means that it feels like a ship fic without romance, which is sort of a strange thing. It feels like any romance that is occurring in the mind of the author as they're writing, not happening on the page, which is it's an interesting choice. I think that it maybe doesn't serve if it served the author's intention, that's great. That's what it was supposed to do. But as far as art goes, and does it bring me to an elevated state or of emotion or understanding of these characters when reading it, I think there's a lot of pulling punches going on, and again, the early ending would have sort of helped that factor. So it's an interesting one, certainly.
Clever?
I just wanted to add that I kind of feel like this is a romance in the same way as the original Rocky is a romance. Just putting that out there.
Explain.
Please elaborate.
Well, without spoilers, I guess. I can talk about Rocky.
No spoilers for Rocky, or no spoilers for the fic.
Yeah, well,
because spoil the hell out of Rocky. It's from the 70s. So spoiler warning's gone.
Let's imagine for a second that there was no Adrian in Rocky, because quite frankly, that whole subplot in Rocky is kind of meh.
Ooh, I mean, I strongly disagree, but go on.
Well, it's kind of meh. It's really about him proving himself to himself. But eventually, Apollo Creed and him become like bestest buddies. Like, you could almost call that a bromance. And it starts out of the mutual respect that they kind of, that develops out of them actually in the ring. Because for most of the time of the movie, I was going to call it flick, of the movie, Apollo just thinks this is just some bum, right? So if you want to call that a romance, and if you put that tag on it, I'm certain that people today would look at that and be like, oh, yeah. Oh, it's romance. Look at them. Look at them hate each other. Now, look at them. Oh, there's like respect and it's going to blossom into something, right? So I kind of feel like, if Rocky could be a romance between the two antagonists in that movie, then maybe this is a romance too, but it's in the same kind of vein almost. It's, as Skywriter said, he's like, well, maybe the romance part was sort of imagined in the author's head. It never really made to the page. And if you're told it's a romance, then you can sort of add that element into the reading, and be like, oh, and look for things that maybe aren't necessarily written, but you could imagine it there, if that makes sense.
It does.
Clever. I have to say, I feel like you may be wrong, you may not be wrong, but I feel like you're looking at this whole thing through the lens of, I know for a fact that you are a diehard Apollo Creed Rocky shipper, and I feel like you're looking at
We know
this
about that
Pony
3,000 word fanfic that you've got on your hard drive.
What?
through that lens, and so I feel like
The hard drive.
sorry, continue.
Adrian!
I think you should not let your dreams be dreams. I think you need to write this Apollo Creed Rocky the Crocky shitfic that you've been had in the back of your head for decades now.
You were supposed to keep us on track, not do this, Neighrator.
He's been gone for too long.
Arguably,
You were
we were
supposed to bring balance to the dark side.
arguably we were off the rails as soon as we Clever started talking about Apollo Creed.
Oh,
Rocky
come
shit.
on! It's apt.
Right, I am going to grab the horns of this podcast and put us back in, because I think we've actually already talked kind of vaguely about tone and pacing, so we're going straight into spoiler territory. So if anybody is listening at this point and hasn't turned off because we're talking about crocky fanfics, spoilers here. So, full plot summary, courtesy of me. Fuck, right, okay, because apparently I'm getting things wrong. I read this a week ago. Yeah, Celestia's got a soul mark. She's gone for centuries without finding her soulmate. And on the day of Canterlot wedding, she finds out it's Chrysalis. And Chrysalis is horrified by this. Celestia's none too pleased either. And Chrysalis runs away. And we break with canon because the changelings just fucking leave. Later on, she comes back and talks to Celestia, and they have a conversation. And Luna appears near the end, and it feels very much like the setup for a much longer romance, except that that's where the fic ends. Anybody like to add anything to that?
Yes, they have a conversation. My conversations usually involve property damage and beating the shit out of each other as well.
That's like saying that Rocky is about a conversation between two people.
Oh my god!
Watch this drama unfold of this
I need
conversation.
somebody somewhere just to draw Clever as Rocky Balboa, and just so that we can put this in the thumbnail or something like that. I don't know.
Ooh, that could be fun.
Is now the right time to say that I've never seen it?
What?
Kids these days.
Wow. I know
It
I
is
know,
worth
but-
a watch. It's very much of its time, but it's a quick watch and it's pretty good.
And there's
Plus,
random
actually,
robots for some reason.
That's later.
I mean, that doesn't come into it till later on when it went completely off the rails. The first one was made on a shoestring budget and was very much a passion project that everybody pulled their money into, thinking it might not actually work.
It was,
and you can see the passion in what they were making.
it was written, directed, and starred by Sly, and it was his first real attempt.
First proper film,
And
yeah.
he knocked it out of the park, and that's what launched him to stardom.
It's very rough around the edges, but still good.
And very quotable.
The way a lot of classical cinema is.
And capitalist propaganda.
I mean, yes, like I said, of its time. I loved Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and holy fuck, that doesn't stand up thematically today. Anyway, getting back on track.
On track.
Does anybody want to add anything to the plot summary? Because, yeah, I've summed it up, because I don't want to spoil the entire fic. I want people to have something interesting to read. But, is there anything I've missed?
Perhaps a blow-by-blow account?
Ha 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 ha! Wow, the double entendre. Right, okay. Yeah, characterization then. We'll finally get onto the plot point that I accidentally brought up earlier. Characterization. Do we feel it's accurate for Celestia, Chrysalis, and Luna? We'll start with Celestia, then Chrysalis, and then latterly Luna, because she is kind of the third main character, but very much secondary tier to the rest. So, Celestia. Illya, you're possibly the biggest fan of all three of these characters, so I'll start with you. Do you think that Celestia is characterized well in this story?
That's a tough one. Of all the characters that we're speaking about, she would probably be, in my opinion, the least well characterized.
Oh.
I'm not sure how much of that is actually true and how much of it is because I feel like the fic was always just a little out of sync. It's like things happened that, okay, this thing should have happened over here and this one should have happened over there. So perhaps my reservation is the fact that the whole thing was a little out of sync for me. Like Chrysalis smashed her head with a bottle of booze, and Celestia just sort of says, "Huh? Why'd you do that?" It's what? It seemed like there should have been some reaction there rather than just kind of tossing it off. It's tricky. She's probably pretty well characterized, but maybe the lack of proper synchronization within a story has led me to feel otherwise.
Neighrator?
Celestia's characterization was fine, in my opinion. I thought we saw her be really protective of her ponies, and the whole heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I'm fine with Celestia's characterization.
Skywriter?
It's a very fandom Celestia. I mean, it's not when we put the fandom has done a lot of heavy lifting for the princesses as far as their characterization goes. It's a perfectly fine fandom Celestia. Everybody loves to see Celestia let off the chain, blow some stuff up. Is this true to the cartoon? Not exactly. She's more. I think she's in certain measures more reserved and more childlike as she's seen in the canon. But as far as fandom goes, no issues as such.
Midori?
Well, it's as they say, Celestia and the princesses, a lot of the heavy lifting for their characters has been done by the fandom itself. It's probably why they even appeared in that episode that was just devoted to background characters getting more limelight. The Celestia in the show, it could honestly change from episode to episode depending on the writer, and she didn't have enough characterization, I feel, in the show to have a definitive version of herself. So this version of her that we have here in this story, I felt that it was good. I liked it. I thought that it was fine. I don't want to use the word serviceable because it was more than that to me.
Competent?
It was a competent representation of Celestia. Yes, that is good.
Celestia is infinitely serviceable.
Oh, dear God.
Oh, God. Well,
I'm rolling up a newspaper.
42 minutes in, we're doing better than usual.
Bap. Bap.
Midnight?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It was definitely a fandom Celestia, but it was still a very good Celestia. I actually liked one part where she says she puts on a mask because she has to be calm for her people. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, it was fine. I thought she was alright, Celestia. Though I'm more of a Luna fan myself.
Everyone is.
We'll bear that in mind for when we get to that. Clever?
I just want to repeat that everyone's more of a fan of Luna, and if you aren't, well, you're wrong. But
I'm more of a Cadence fan after writing FIT.
well, but well, you
That was Skywriter. Oh my God, sorry, you just sounded so different.
it was a bit of Kermit the Frog there.
That was scary. I thought that was Illya.
Oh no!
Which is why I was like confused.
Awesome.
Like, I know that Illya loves Luna more. What?
It was a guttural moan of approval.
Clever, come on.
I think one of the things that the show doesn't do very well is it doesn't really give us the mind of Celestia. She's always kind of like this Dumbledore-esque kind of mentor that's sort of just there to provide quests and things to do, or be accountable to for some reason. It's the best episodes with her character development. Like I can't remember the name of the episode, but the one where Twilight is fretting about Starlight Glimmer and about her
the
moving
beginning
around.
of season 7,
And
where she's got the Crystal Castle, and Celestia's like, no, I thought I had these thoughts when you were graduating.
exactly. And we finally see Celestia like actually have a personality. Like, oh, I have concerns. Like, there are things that worry me, and they're not just like things of like, oh, they would worry everyone. They're anxieties that would be unique to her. And so it's those episodes.
Can I just point something out?
Okay.
I reckon the better representation of her in canon is Slice of Life, where she and Luna are just sniping at each other at Cranky's wedding.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Yeah, that's good. And the one where they had to trade marks was good. Again, because we're actually getting into her relationship, and she's not always this perfect kind of character. We finally decided to give her some foibles and flaws and anxieties and issues, and so she's mostly of a fairly blank canvas to work with. Not entirely, but I mean mostly. So there's a lot that people can do with her. And one of the things that I really like when stories decide to explore her mentality, and this story I think does that quite well. I think it provides a background, sort of metacognition for us to kind of peek into what could be going on in there. And in this alternate universe where soul marks are a thing, how would that affect someone who's ageless? And how would that be just an additional anxiety that would be, there for that individual? So I like the characterization of the character as presented here. Will it tick anyone off that likes Celestia and has a particular idea of her? I don't think so. Like, I think that's what we're getting at when we're talking about the characterization. Like, are we finding it so offensively off from who we think that character is that it'll affect our ability to enjoy or even buy into the story? And I would say no. This is a take on Celestia that I think it suits the story well, and it helps tell the story. So I think it's great.
Okay, so I'll kick off with you then, Clever, for Chrysalis.
We get a little more about Chrysalis in the I feel like we get to know Chrysalis better because we focus on what her motivations are a little more in canon. But here we have this unique factor, and I think that the idea of this soul mark is important to the story, not just because it's about that, but because it is probably the one thing that would keep these two from automatically like just not destroying each other immediately, given the chance, and giving them this thing that they both recognize as is supposed to be important, and both of them have been waiting centuries to like meet their soulmate, so to speak. So I think if Chrysalis deviates at all from her normal character, it's because of this idea of the soulmate and the inherent curiosity that a millennia of waiting to meet your soulmate might generate. And I think that excuses a lot of behavior that we might see as a little uncharacteristic of her in this fic. I think we can explain it with that. And I think that is a good use of this device in this story. I think that I almost feel like the author sat down and went, I want to ship these two characters, or I want to put these two characters at a position where they're not necessarily just going to want to destroy each other. how can I create something that makes sense, rather than just say it happens, like how can I move it so that it makes sense that these two would actually want to interact at some level and maybe actually possibly listen to each other for more than half a second. And I think it works that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it does.
Neighrator?
I don't have much to say about Chrysalis's characterization. Yeah, fine, I think. Fine fandom Chrysalis.
All right, then. Midori?
I thought that this Chrysalis was very well done in the short amount of time that the fic has to portray her character. I think that it does a wonderful job expressing her motivations and giving an ideal of the kind of life that she has lived that determines the way that she behaves in this story, in the conflict, the climactic scene and everything. I thought that it was very good and possibly a bit better than just, well, I feel like the show, if not initially, eventually went the route of making Chris just, I'm bad guy, grr, and like kind of ended on that note for her character. So seeing her like actually being portrayed as a actual ruler who cares and is just used to subterfuge being a way of life, like I thought that was conveyed very well in the time allotted to it.
Midnight?
I have one question first. How old is Chrysalis? Because I never thought of her to be as old as Celestia.
Presumably in this fic that she is quite old. She certainly seems to have been around a long time. But your mileage may vary in fandom because we're never given an actual age by canon. Midori? No, yeah. Midori, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's never actually established how old she is in the show, and the implication being, like, she could very well be an ageless entity as well, and the fic itself expresses that, say, a century after Luna was banished, that is when the soul mark appeared on Celestia, which the implication by the information that we were given in the initial chapter, the prologue of sorts, is that when Chrysalis was born, that's when the soul mark appeared. So that is the implication here, that she's like over 900 years old.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, she's so much older than Celestia's so much older than Chrysalis. Scandal. I'm gonna make a twit longer.
It's a lowly fic. It's a lowly fic.
No, we're not going that route. Right,
nope.
I'm modding this.
Moving swiftly along.
Anywho. I thought Chrysalis was very angry in this. Like, nearly the later seasons, when she's alone, she becomes more crazy angry. And this, I kind of felt like she got to that point way quicker, but that may be just because of the situation, as said, that she found her soulmate and she was freaking out. So it could be explained about that, but it felt a little off, other than, when she baits Celestia into stuff. And I immediately go, oh, she's dead. But yeah, just, she's a bit angry for my liking, but that can be explained away.
Illya?
I don't know if anyone else has the problem I do. I've read so much more fan fiction than I have watched the show that it's a little difficult for me to separate the two sometimes.
Yes. Yes, I have that problem sometimes.
I mean, that's fair considering there's more fan fiction than there is show.
Way more.
Way more. So much more.
And there's the accepted fanons, the things that people just accept to be true, to the point where they almost reject canon when canon comes to contravene it. See Vinyl Octavia or Lyra and Sweetie Drops. The fact that I don't even call her Sweetie Drops, she's Bonbon, because that was the fanon.
Going strictly by the show, I think it's a very accurate characterization. I mean, she was thwarted in her efforts to become Cadence, so she had to try a different route. So she tried sneaking in with Luna and trying to get some information, it's a subterfuge. And then she got real angry. And since she was like the only character almost at the end of the show, the regular run, that wasn't reformed, then it seems logical that she would remain angry no matter what, and never forgiving and never understanding, never compassionate. That just seems to be accurate to me. So I'd say her portrayal was very accurate.
That's what I was thinking, is that I had to remind myself at points in this that she's accurate to the show, but not to fanon. To the point where there were moments where I'm like, that's very out of character. Wait, no, it isn't. Who haven't asked yet? Skywriter.
The problems here with Chrysalis, I mean, it's a fine Chrysalis as far as canon's concerned. The problem with characterization with Chrysalis is baked into the very character of Chrysalis by the canon, and every fic featuring Chrysalis, to a lesser or greater extent, is to sort of deal with the fundamental contradiction of her character, which is to say that she's a master manipulator who feeds on love, who nonetheless makes some of the most dunderheaded maneuvers when attempting to infiltrate, and simultaneously gets people to hate her and is very abrasive towards everyone, which seems to be cross purposes. In this case, that's fine as far as the canon goes. She's well drawn to do exactly that. If this were a standalone work, you could definitely ask why she's behaving in such a counterproductive fashion. I mean, I think a really expansive, exhaustive fic will have to come up with an idea or a solution to this fundamental contradiction of Chrysalis. This fic doesn't have time for that, certainly. So, I mean, it's drawn well as far as the canon goes. The problems are from the beginning, ab initio.
Am I right in recalling that years ago you wrote a story about, I swear it was you, who wrote a story about Derpy being a changeling, and she's the reason they picked the wrong pink pony because Chrysalis ended up impersonating Pinky.
Yeah. Well, she didn't actually end up impersonating Pinky. It's just that Derpy. This was a story of mine called Derplicity.
That was it. It was one of the very first ones I ever adapted for anything.
Yes, I remember that. So the idea is that Derpy Hooves / Muffins / whatever you want to call her, was fundamentally had a fundamental problem, is that she was doing all her preliminary research on Pinky, and Chrysalis did not actually attempt to emulate Pinky. It's just that when the time came to give her report, realized with a sinking feeling in her that she had completely not done any research whatsoever, because she'd been researching the wrong pony, and so pulled a bunch of facts, out of thin air, which is why the infiltration was so terrible, because she was just making up all of her preliminary changeling reports from the beginning. So that was sort of a comic way of explaining why.
Made a lot of sense. That became fanon in my head for a bit for why Chrysalis did what Chrysalis did.
So yeah, there's a problem with there's a problem is maybe a harsh word to say. There are some inconsistencies baked into the character from the beginning, as I said earlier, and so yeah, she's behaving irrationally. She's not behaving in a way that makes sense. Does it make sense? No. Is it true to the character as we've seen in the show? Yeah. So.
Has everyone weighed in on Chrysalis now? Because I've knocked my post-its off the table, and I have my list of who'd spoken. Okay, so we'll go on to Luna. And we'll start with Illya, because I know Luna is also special to you, Illya. What do you think of... I know she was a secondary character, but she appeared enough to have a character. So what do you think of her characterization?
Here's another one where fanon has screwed me. Rather than Luna, which what I preferred. She was excellent as far as her playfulness goes. I would have expected her to be a slightly bit more protective of her sister, but she kind of stayed out of it and let things go as they would. I just get all doe-eyed and slobbery when I'm reading Luna, so it's hard to say that she was not in character. But I think that as far as the story went, and to service the story, she was quite well in character.
Clever, what do you think?
Well, I do love me some Luna. And again, like I mentioned before, like canon-wise, we probably get the most characterization out of any of the princesses for Luna, because we get a bit of backstory, we get a bit of this, and Fanon, of course, is always in the back of my head too. But because she doesn't have a huge role in all of this, I think what they've got with Luna included seems appropriate. She shows concern for her sister. She doesn't seem to overstep. The word choices they use for her seem consistent with Luna. I would, like Illya said, I would have thought she would have been a little more protective. But again, I don't think I've ever seen, like, this is we're in the spoiler part of the whole thing. So there's this.
Yeah, we are.
So there's this scene where Luna kind of walks in on Chrysalis and Celestia just all out brawling with each other in a room, and Celestia's pretty much like, "Don't interfere, get the hell out," and Luna's like, "Okay." And I kind of feel like at this, I mean, you could explain it, like you could say, well, Celestia's like nigh immortal, and like it'd be kind of like someone walking in on like world's greatest godlike thing, and basically like, well, I don't think you really need my help here, like she's just, Celestia is that powerful, we're not really concerned, kind of thing. Except that, of course, the issue is that no one really knows what kind of threat Chrysalis is at this point. Is she actually a threat? Could she be a threat? And to the actual life of Celestia. So that's the only part that kind of was like, well, I kind of wish she would have run in there. But it's important to the story that stays between Celestia and Chrysalis at this point. So to have her just kind of walk in and walk out, I kind of almost feel like as the author just kind of being like, wouldn't this be a funny moment? And I agree, it is kind of a funny moment. So outside of that, I'm okay with it. I think I think that the characterization is only so important as does it take me out of the story, and it didn't. So I felt that was fine.
Midori?
Well, when it comes to Luna in this bin, I thought that she was portrayed fine. She was tired most of the time that she was portrayed in the story, which honestly was somewhat amusing. And equally amusing was that the time that she spent in the story was showing the side of her that she probably only shows to Celestia, which was as a snarky sibling, which is completely in character for either sister. But it's hard for me to put into words. It feels like she was simply there to give Celestia to talk to collect her thoughts. But thankfully, they did give Luna personality in her presence rather than just being a calm, regal wall for her to talk off of. So I enjoyed the route that they went with the portrayal of Luna in this.
She was comic relief and a sounding board. That's what you want.
Which was an odd choice given the tone of the fic up until that point, but we're getting on to that in the next point, and I've just punched my microphone. All right, Skywriter, what did you think of Luna?
Luna is fine as far as her role is a sort of a more darker, enigmatic yin. She is young. I do think that she is artificial. Not in her presentation in any way, shape, or form, but as I think, as you're hinting at, that we might cover soon, she's artificial. I guess more so that better say that she is artifice. She is the author of the fic trying to set the tone, and her efforts to set the tone, Luna's efforts to set the tone, as was mentioned earlier, sometimes seem to come across as a little bit weird. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Celestia's a big girl; she can take care of herself. This is what the author wants us to feel. It's not legitimately what Luna would feel in the circumstance. So I feel like she is a tool being used by the author as a tone modulating element. So in that way, she's well drawn. Her language is fine. Her characterization is fine. But I think her presence in this fic is, I hate to say intrusive. It's not intrusive because she sort of provides a necessary tone to it. But she's mechanical. She is doing what the author wants her to do.
Is she an authorial insert, do you reckon?
Not fully, but she is certainly communicating what the author wants us to feel. I think that's the author mouthpiecing her, but I think it is the author certainly agrees with Luna's take on things, I think.
Midnight?
In some ways, I would agree. I think she definitely is setting the tone and moving things along. Though, I think there's been a slight misinterpretation or misremembering. I thought it was the guards that ran in and that Celestia threw out. And then they went to get Luna, and then Luna came in and caught them in bed. Am I wrong?
I think she still serves pretty much the same purpose of she walks in and goes, oh, nope, I'm gonna leave.
Well, yeah, true. I got confused there. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like she has more information. I sometimes felt like she had more information than she was saying. Like she knew something that no one else did, that maybe soulmates can't hurt each other or something like that. Because I agree that she would normally be more worried or something. Because otherwise, the
element of protectiveness and over her sister did seem to be a bit absent.
Yeah, that, or she was just like, well, maybe she knew something about the changelings that her sister didn't. I don't know, but it felt like she had more knowledge than she was giving away sometimes.
Neighrator?
Luna's characterization was fine. Not much to say on it, nothing.
Has everyone spoken on Luna now? Clever, did I ask you? I asked you before, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Right, cool. I really need to pick up my post-it. I'm sorry. I do everything on post-it notes when I'm doing this bloody podcast. Sorry, I'm very old school. Everything's a pen and fucking paper.
That's allowed. Pen and paper is great.
It's not when the cat's sitting on them.
That's the cat's ass.
That's why I couldn't pick it up. Fuck up, Milo. Fuck off.
Does that make you worthy?
No, it means that I've got a cat's bumhole on my post-it notes and I don't like it.
Cat bum.
Well, right, okay, he's giving me back now, right.
I hate it whenever they steal your pens.
So anything. It's just, ugh. Right, okay, I've got my stuff back now, so I can actually do this. Sorry. All play stops for random catitude. Okay. So we're going for impressions of the prose style. How does the story read? Is it trying to achieve any particular tone? How well does it achieve this? We have covered this somewhat so far, so we could keep this bit rather brief and we'll go on to the more specific notes, because we are 51 minutes into the recording. So, impressions of the prose style. I'm going to start with Midori on this one.
The prose style?
Like, is it competently written? Is it trying to achieve a particular tone? I personally found this to be a bit tonal whiplash in places, where I was led to believe it was going to be quite dramatic and quite serious at the start, and it maintained that right up through the fight and the admission that Sunset Shimmer was dead. No, she's not. And then suddenly there's this comedy bit at the end that I just wasn't expecting, and it did feel a bit tonal whiplashy to me. Did you feel anything like that, or do you think it was competently written and matched well all the way through?
I felt like the fight itself was a tonal whiplash. I wasn't expecting things to break out into that intense of a fight, but it wasn't a bad thing. It definitely, I got a lot of emotions from throughout the fight itself that I guess, could only be portrayed during a conflict. And it's very hard to express emotions during a fight, but I definitely got the feelings that they were going for there. The bit at the end I didn't mind, and I thought was a nice way to wrap up the story with a little bit of a cherry on top of it, because, like, I'm a fan of, like, old Marvel movies and how they have, like, conflict, but they're able to work in a little bit of comedy while they're doing it. Having the story, like, end on the note that it ends on, I thought was fine. And the overall telling of the story, I honestly felt was a bit slow at first, because it felt like it was a bit unnecessary to rehash a lot of the stuff that already happened in the show, but at the same time, I suppose it was necessary to convey what the character that we were focused on was feeling and why they were feeling that way leading into the events. So I thought the story played out perfectly fine.
Skywriter?
Not right sure about this one. This one is there is I would say, yeah, tonal whiplash, but also there are some other inconsistencies in tone pacing that I think don't serve it very well. I think starting it out with starting out the fic, making chapter 1 of the fic be an extended treatise on the mechanical nature of your universe is never a great choice. I mean, I think that could be saved for the appendix, if anything, if at all. There's a lot of information here that we don't need. World building is great. I love world building, but we didn't need all that. We could have covered that within the most salient parts of that. We could have covered in another scene, in dialogue, characters talking. Wasn't quite sure about that decision. Again, as other people have noticed, there was some strange, some unusual choices. Again, there is this moment where Chrysalis makes the strange, I guess in character, again for the show, decision to rile Celestia up in the worst way that she knows how. And this seems like it's an excuse for the author to do a big, does that make much sense? It's sort of hastily hand-waved away in the narrative by saying that Chrysalis is just trying to get to know Celestia in order to submit, and that's why she riled her up in the worst way possible. This does not make sense for someone who wants to feed on her love. This makes sense for someone who wants to just get under her skin. And I don't think that this is, again, Chrysalis is working at cross purposes with herself. The story then says that was a lie. And Chrysalis isn't actually that big of a threat after all, as far as narratively speaking. It's like, oh, she didn't kill a beloved main character. That's fine. And then then we ramp it up to the very end, and it's like, oh, is she going to kill Celestia because Celestia is powerless before her? And it's like, no, she's not. We have determined that. You, the author, sunk that plot point midway through the fic in your desperation to bring down the tone. So there's no tension at the end. It's like, yeah, okay, so I think there's what's intended to be this cliffhanger moment where Chrysalis is like, oh, is she going to kill Celestia? Nobody thinks she's going to kill Celestia. We determined that she's not going to kill Celestia. She didn't kill Sunset Shimmer narratively. So it builds, drops, builds again, and expects the tension to still be there. Tension's not there because it was dropped, and I don't really know what was supposed to convince us that Chrysalis was any different than she was when she had the reveal midway along when she wasn't a killer. Why would she kill now? The author was doing a lot of work to try and create that question in your mind. It didn't work. And then there's a snuggly scene at the end, which again feels like the author wanting to do that more than anything that's justified by the characters and their choices thus far. Wasn't quite sure about that one. Like I said, any individual scene works well for the purpose that individual scene has. Taken as a whole, it is inconsistent at best.
Neighrator?
I agree with absolutely everything that Skywriter said, but I will confess that the treatise on soul markings at the beginning of the fic was one of my favorite parts. But I realize I'm atypical. I'm that kid that used to enjoy reading textbooks in my free time when I was a kid on the weekends. So that was one of my. I just kind of settled in as like, ooh, yes, that's the good brain buzzies. That's what I need. So he's
Gotta get that dopamine.
Skywriter is absolutely correct. He absolutely could have. The story arguably would have been better off for literally everyone else by working in the world building in some other way and having it occur more naturally in the conversation. But that was arguably the strongest. What I like best about the story. If I'm honest.
I have to second that, NP. So it's not literally everyone else, because there's at least this other person in this group that really appreciated that. I really kind of liked it too.
I have seen stories where that has worked particularly well in that style, sort of written in a nonfiction style, or written in like it's a textbook or a history book or something like that. What was it? Oh, Obiter Dicta. Who wrote that one? Anyway, so there's quite a few other fandom fics that I've read that are in the similar style that I really, really enjoy, just personally. And that's all I have to say on that.
Midori? No, I started with you, didn't I, Midori? Midnight?
Well, yes, but there was something that I wanted to add.
Rebut away?
I don't agree with Skywriter on the note that the ending was obvious. I personally feel like, sure, you can come to a conclusion and you can feel like everything was predictable if it plays out the manner that you expect to. I'm guilty of that with a lot of stuff, a lot of movies and whatnot, horror especially. But I honestly, even the only thing that had me thinking that this was going to have a happy ending was the fact that you told me that it wasn't a dark story and that it was a lovey-dovey fic going into it. Honestly, like right before the epilogue, I was still thinking to myself, is this going to end on a dark note? Like, is this a trick? Is it a trap? Like, where are they messing with me? And it was dark all along. She dies and takes her place. Like, maybe I'm just not as good at reading ahead like other people might be, but I got lost in like what could happen and felt like there was still a chance of something curveballing at the very end there.
Clever? Oh, no, sorry. Clever? Midori, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, but I can, other people can talk. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I was like, I start, no you start. No, I start, no you start. I wasn't sure if I was talking over you.
It's fine, please.
Can I go? Is it safe?
Yes!
Are you sure?
Go!
Okay! I would like to read a selected section from the fic, if that's all right. It wasn't his fault. Given what Luna knew of modern Equestria, he could hardly be expected to know that when she got like this, Tia hated to be interrupted. The first time Luna had tried to interfere in what her sister termed a personal duel, it had taken 3 weeks for the fur on her rump to grow back, to say nothing of what she had accidentally seen in her sister's tent later that night. She shuddered. The modern sock on the doorknob was a much more elegant solution. So, this kind of implies that Celestia kind of has this that there is at least a pre-established pattern in Luna's mind that, Celestia's greatest challenges turn into some kind of big turn on for her for some reason. That compounded with that we've got the soulmate adding on to it. Why do I want to talk about this? I feel that this section is an example of kind of that weird tonal flip around that we were discussing earlier. That it's like, why is that there, and it's kind of weird in a way, and it's sort of foreshadowing too that she's, you know, probably, well, not necessarily probably fine, but that this is supposed to be a romance of some kind.
Okay. I agree with you on this one. I apologize. I didn't really see it until you kind of laid it out, like the transition from the epilogue to the way that the epilogue starts. That is a bit of a total whiplash. I will agree with you there.
Yeah. It's not that when I first read it that I really felt, you know, pulled and turned, and like it doesn't come across like out of the blue, but when you start thinking about it and you start going through it and you go, yeah, this is a little weird, and that's kind of how I felt thematically with the stories, that there were moments where I was like, well, this is a little weird, but because I was enjoying the ride, I kind of excused it. So you get much bigger whiplash in a crack fic, right? I almost think that we should call this a crack fic, because it kind of is. It kind of is.
I would hesitate to go that far, because crackfic it's defined by its off the wall.
There's some off the wallness that's going on now. It's just much more subtle.
But it's not quite as full of non sequiturs as a legitimate crackfic. This
Off
isn't
the wall
like
and
the
through the wall.
Yeah.
This isn't like the
wall.
Alicorn button. The Alicorn button, link in the doobly-doo, is a proper crackfic.
I agree.
This isn't that. This is, at best, has some comedy tones to it. It's tongue-in-cheek in places, and that's what I mean when I said tonal whiplash earlier, that it has these tongue-in-cheek moments, but then we're also meant to take part of it really, really seriously.
Yeah, and it's and like I said, it's enjoyable, right? Like, you know, there's some, it's, you know, would it make it better if we ironed them out? And that's just kind of a hanging question I have. I don't know. I like it kind of the way that it is. I agree that it sacrifices, you know, some more intense emotional moments to keep it more light, but I don't mind that. I mean, you know, for me, it's just interesting to see how we could see this relationship develop. So, if I had my biggest complaint with it is it kind of stops just as it gets going. And I think it is because the writer had the idea of how these two could potentially start a relationship, but then maybe didn't have any more gas after that. You know, they wrote what they kind of had in their head, and they didn't have a good thing. I would love to see someone, if not the original author, but someone kind of take this up and run with it a little more, because I rather like the ideas that are seated in that. This idea that you could have these two people that start off oppositional, but then are supposed to make each other better somehow. So I don't know if I talked things I was supposed to talk about, but gosh darn, I'm going to fill some time.
This podcast in a nutshell.
Midnight?
I don't know what I can add. I mean, I also was thrown by the first chapter. I actually spent a good 10 minutes being like, clicking on links going, have I somehow glitched fanfiction somehow? And jumped to chapter 7. But yeah, I had a bit of whiplash as well to an extent, but then again, I don't usually mind that too much if the story was longer. Like, if the story kept going, then it might not have been as bad, but yeah, it was a bit of whiplash. Everyone else has stated everything else, I thought, so that's my...
Illya?
I like the fact that you use the term tonal whiplash, because that sums up what I was trying to say when I felt like the story was a bit out of sync. And then, of course, Skywriter brought all the points home that made me feel that way. So that wraps that up nicely. I don't think the fic would have been very good if it hadn't had that first chapter, though. The excerpt from the treatise or whatever it was, because if I hadn't had that, then we ran straight into this thing, and the story was just told like it was. Without that, I wouldn't know what was going on. What's these words they're talking about, you know, and all this, and this language and these writings, and so I really needed it, and I enjoyed it. I felt like as far as how the story read, it read comfortably, except for the tonal shifts and things that were a little odd. But it was very enjoyable. I went straight through it without any, stopping to figure out what was going on or anything. So I think it achieved what it was trying to do. Like many others, I think the story should have been at least twice as long as it was to sort of flesh these points out a bit.
Well, that does actually lead into a point that's being made later on, which, I'm going to move this up to now. And MP, it was a point you've put in, which is the pacing. Is this fic too long or too short? And it does segue quite nicely from what Illya was just saying. So, MP, would you want to explain what you meant by that?
Too short. This fic was too short, in my opinion. I think we could have used a lot more. Just a lot more of everything. The story felt sort of rushed. The fight scene towards the end there had to do just about all the heavy lifting, or the confrontation with Celestia and Chrysalis, which led into the fight scene. So I think personally an additional 5 chapters or so would have helped. In terms of like the way the story was constructed, it turns out like Chrysalis overhearing everything Celestia said, and she's thinking about, I should go to the Badlands and make a diplomatic parlay, and instead we're just like, nope, we're doing it now. Chrysalis was here the whole time. It just felt rushed to me. I feel like the premise of this fic would have done well with like a more of an adventure setting where, I don't know, they're shipwrecked together and then they have to work together to find common ground, the old enemy mine trope. I think that would have suited a fic with this premise better, personally.
Does anyone want to weigh in on this one about the pacing of it, whether or not they thought it was too short? Because I've got to say, I agree. I think this story should have either been a couple of thousand words shorter and made it so that it was just the reveal of the soulmate, or it should have been much longer and delved into their relationship. It'll go Skywriter and then Clever. Skywriter?
Yeah, I mean, we're set up with and I'm not going to deny that it's pretty well written, but we have basically an encyclopedia entry talking about this concept, the core conceit of it, and how it all pans out, and how it can mean romance, or it doesn't necessarily mean romance, but it can mean this tremendously impactful relationship between parties. That we see things where they have these massive diplomatic relationships that span, hugely influential for the history of both the characters themselves and the history of the world around them. And then when it happens, they snuggle for a while, and Chrysalis sucks on her love a little bit, and that's about it.
And that's not a euphemism, folks.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's literally what happens. Where was that? Where was this thing we were promised in the beginning, that this was somehow this world-shaping, life-changing thing for both these people and the world around them? We don't get it. It just falls off. We are meant to say, I guess we're meant to imagine it in the future that this is going to happen, but I don't see it. So it could have used more of that. Either not, like as Scribbler pointed out, either it didn't have to have that, but once you set it up, it kind of had to have something like that, some sort of a direction that would show. I mean, because we're meant to imagine that this is going to be this massive diplomatic coup and will bring friendship between these two races, but we don't really see it happening. We don't really see Chrysalis or Celestia remarkably changed in any way, shape, or form by this encounter. The most we get is Chrysalis gets a little tsundere thing at the very end, where it's like, no, it's not really love, I'm just feeding on her. But I mean, that's as far as the character transformation goes, is a tsundere moment in the very, the final paragraph of the fic. I think we needed more.
Like a fucking tsundere vampire. I'm just feeding on you, Baka.
Yeah, it's exactly literally what it was.
You already think.
Right, Clever, you were the next one.
Yeah, yeah. It needs to be longer. It does. Because we've built to this moment of where we have our two adversaries in a moment where they're not fighting and they're not necessarily diametrically opposed to each other, but they haven't really begun a true relationship beyond that. There's just sort of the promise of that will happen. And you kind of want to see how that plays out a bit more, like a lot bit more. I'm not saying anything I haven't already said, I guess. The ending like kind of leaves you on a bit of a cliffhanger, so to speak. And we're left with that. I would love, there's a lot of challenge and there's a lot of obstacles yet for them to overcome, for them to be in any kind of worthwhile relationship. And it's definitely something to explore. And if we're going to call this a romance, I think you need to get beyond not being the tar out of each other to call it a romance. I mean, yeah, she's sucking love out of her, and that's not a euphemism, but and she's like making sure she's not actually dead at the end, which I guess is a nice thing. But I mean, that's far from most people's idea of romance. Like, oh, I found someone, they're like near death, I caused it, I'm gonna make sure that they're, don't die. Oh, you must be in love with them. Like, it's not the natural.
Well, they're really cute while they're sleeping.
Yeah.
So now,
yeah, it's.
I'm going to set aside all my other issues with this person,
right?
Because they're.
It's. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So, for anyone out there that's like a huge wants to see some romance, I mean, if your idea of romance is like beating on each other, go to a self-help group immediately. That's not romance, okay? That's unhealthy. But if you like reading stories where two fighters fall in love, well, I mean, you almost get that here, almost, just about, really. She was in it for the love energy. That was all, really.
I mean, that's a plot point I would have liked to have seen elaborated on if it had been longer. Is she in this soulmate situation for the sake of the soulmate situation and the other pony, or is she there because she's hungry? But there wasn't enough room within the narrative to explore that.
It's not like there's not I'm so sorry. It's not like there's not enough precedent for the star-crossed enemies to lovers trope in anime and fan fictions and things like that. So I think the author would have done well to stretch out the story a bit and throw in maybe a few well-trod plot devices, shipwreck together, and they're forced to cooperate and they slowly discover common ground and so on.
Illya?
I just wonder if anybody else like me felt like the author just got tired of writing and quit, or had to get to supper or something.
Amen.
It just, it didn't feel like so much that there wasn't enough padding in the story. It's just that it had further to go, and it just got wrapped up in a terrible hurry.
It did feel like they just sort of finished.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, yeah, that's that. They're not in bed. That's all they need to be.
They rolled over and fell to sleep just after they finished.
Yeah, it should have either been shorter or longer.
There needs to be, for lack of a better word, there needs to be more talk than action. And also the whole thing with Cadence as well. Like, Cadence was far too willing to, let Celestia go off. That's just another thought, but yeah.
No, yeah, I got that feeling as well. It's one of the reasons why I didn't include her or Shining Armor in the characterization section, because they only appeared for a little bit, but it very much felt like they were just, and Cadence and Shining Armor are also here. And that was the sum total of their presence in the fic. It was, we need to write off why they're not kicking off about this soulmate thing. But I would have wanted to see that. I really would have wanted to see how conflicted they are about the idea of Celestia's soulmate being the person who impersonated and imprisoned her niece.
But that's not what the author wanted to write about. They wanted to write about the other stuff.
Ow.
Also, the fact that they rushed the whole Chrysalis got into the castle again, because she pretended to be a waiter and a maid immediately after the entire thing happened. Like, I'm sorry, but if I was Chrysalis, I would have been staying in my big hive, going, "Oh, no, wait, what happened? How the hell? What does this mean? What should I do?" I'd be panicking, because this gives me a connection to one of my enemies, apparently, the one who probably wants to kill me. I wouldn't be sneaking into their bedroom anytime soon.
Unless it was to murder them.
That too, yeah, but maybe not that soon.
And maybe that's why she was there. I don't know. Like, I think this also.
Put a mind controller.
I think this also speaks to, like the whole device of the soul mark, and that how, if you live for hundreds of years with this thing, like, how would, and you finally found this individual, how would you know how you would react, or how these characters would react? Like, I think the author's leaning heavily on that to try and explain away some behavior like that, because maybe it would force her to do something even dumber than usual, and like immediately go back and observe, like, who is this chick that's got my soul mark on her?
Skywriter, you were tapping before.
Oh, I was saying that I was just tapping more or less in absolute agreement. One of the more interesting things about this thing, about this fic, would be Cadence, who is very much into the concept of finding love, especially for this immortal dowager aunt of hers, and the thrill of that sort of contradicting her very real and personal insult at the hands of this creature, and what that would mean. That's in many ways a somewhat more interesting story than the relationship between Celestia and Chrysalis, which we are treated with the canon. And in the story of the canon of the story is that Celestia is apparently, she gets turned on by rivalries, and Chrysalis wants to suck love, and both of them are not. It's not really a conflict. Then none of these people are really dealing with anything, because they're kind of getting exactly what they want all the time, and are just merely trashing the room in the meantime. It doesn't feel like a real emotional journey that either of them are taking.
The Cadence digression would have been a wonderful thing to explore. As you say, that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, but to quote Cygnus way back when, something's got to either be 4,000 words shorter or 4,000 words longer. So, the soulmate plot point in itself. Did it work in this fic? Do soulmates ever work as a plot point in fiction? Neighrator, I know from talking to you earlier that you actually do have an opinion on this. What do you think?
I admit, the chosen one, or like, yeah. What am I trying to say? The whole idea of like a chosen one, a chosen soul, it's certainly problematic when viewed through today's lens. It's basically just arranged marriage with extra steps. I admit I do still kind of like it. It's sort of a guilty pleasure for me, but I admit it is sort of inherently problematic.
So, does anybody else want to weigh in on their thoughts on just the soulmate principle, whether in this fic or just in fiction in general? Because it gets used a lot, and I've got to admit, it feels a bit like cheating. Like, if you don't want to write a romance, but you don't want to write the established couple, you want to write the falling in love bit, but you don't want to have to put in the work of the falling in love bit. Skywriter, then Clever.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting. We're dealing with this fic is primed to right away talk of it as almost as though it's another more rare form of cutie mark, and I found that kind of interesting. That I think a lot of the time the appeal to the concept cutie mark is very appealing to, for example, a 20-something who ended up being the core My Little Pony adult fan demographic. That is relaxing to say that this whole thing that you've been so worried about, your purpose in life, what you're supposed to do when you're a 20-year-old, what you're going to be doing, that's all taken care of. The universe has decided it. That's super comforting. And in a way, it is strange then that we don't have this sort of thing. We don't get more of the destined lovers because as far as the romantic side of things goes, My Little Pony fandom becomes more of a harem anime in a way. It's like you say, "Oh, you like that pony? Great. Go ahead. Go absolutely nuts with describing this pony and talking about this pony. Make her the focus of your world. Is it the right pony? Who cares? You like it, and that's enough." Where the bit of the soulmate here is sort of, I think that this brings the anxiety about purpose in life to the anxiety about romance in life. Is it the right person? And sometimes people worry about whether it's the right person or not. But I don't know that everyone does. So it's weird that way. It's like, what if cutie mark but love? It becomes the concept of a soulmate certainly is not unique to this fic. This fic is explicitly based on another fic with a similar premise, and you will find fics of this sort across all sorts of nerd culture. We've seen it in like Teen Wolf fan fiction, for instance, specifically, even explicitly with this same setup, that there's some magical thing, some magical mark that you'll know that this person is. It'll be the first words that they say, as it is in this fic. It'll be the first words that they say to you. And it'll be like, oh, yes, that's the right person. I guess I don't have to. And I think that's interesting, that maybe that for some people, the soulmate brings the same relaxation to the concept of romance as a normal cutie mark story brings to the concept of personal destiny or life purpose.
I agree. I think you're onto something there.
Clever?
Yeah, too. That was very well stated. I was going to just say that, does it ever work? I do absolutely believe that it can be a writing shorthand to try and carry some of the burden and lessen it off of the author. But I don't think it's really used that way here exactly. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. I feel like in this particular fic, the whole idea of how they've explained what a soul mark is and what this concept is it leads to a reason for these two to explore a relationship. It doesn't define it entirely, exactly. Or maybe it will at some point, but right now, like, if there was no soul mark, this would go completely differently, and it would be very difficult to get them. Like the writing, I think it would have to be something equally large and artificial to try and push these two together into a personal relationship, or someone that's just far more brilliant than I've seen so far. So I feel like that as a MacGuffin, right, or a literary device to try and move the plot forward, I feel like sometimes it's appropriate. I think it's okay, and because it's an idea that's, I think, deep seated in a lot of cultures. This idea that that there are an or maybe multiple individuals that are so closely made for you that it that they're special on a level that transcends reason, history, distance, that's truly transcendental. So I don't have a problem with the concept. I think it's all in how the author handles it, and I think that in general that's true with a lot of like Deus Ex Machina or MacGuffins. Like they're artificial. They're there to help us, get the story to a certain place and take a certain route. But it's, you can ham-fist it, or you can have some subtlety and move it a particular direction. And I don't really have a problem with it per se. if you've got a problem with, the idea of concepts of destiny or what have you, I mean, that's a discussion all on its own. There's a great little fic that I'm reading right now, and it's not little at all. It's called The Only Mark That Matters, and it's looking at like the effect of a cutie mark on a particular pony, and I would recommend it for us to read, except that it's got like 100 or more chapters already, so it's far too large for us to do for the podcast. But it looks at the idea of what happens if you're given a mark and it just doesn't fit, it doesn't work, and it's kind of the MacGuffin that pushes that story along. And I think it's really well done, because then it explores the idea of, well, what is fate? What does the universe want? And how does that fit into how we make our own lives? Because honestly, these are concepts that I think, as Skywriter was trying to say, I don't want to say plague individuals, because that's maybe not exactly the tone I'm trying to go for, but they concern us. A lot of people want to know, is there a higher power directing our fates? Are our fates sort of sealed already, no matter what we do? Are our actions more important than that, or is that part of the whole thing? How does it all work? And the fact that we're reading a story which has an author, which is essentially, decides the fate of the whole thing, it's sort of, when you get meta about it, it's like, you've got this situation where you're trying to decide about the reality of the universe for yourself. And I feel like that those ideas and those concepts are worth exploring. I think that this particular fic, I think it doesn't do it too ham-fistedly. I think there's actually some eloquence to it. I really like too that they expand the idea of the soulmate as not just necessarily being somebody that's romantically involved, but that they could also just be someone in your life that helps improve you. And because there are lots of people that I've met in my life where I'm not romantically involved in them, but with them, however, I feel like I have a very close connection with them, and having them in my life does make me a better human being. All Pone people present, I'll group you together in that, because I feel that those relationships can do that for you. And whether we have to label them as soulmates or not, well, that's for the author to decide, I guess. And I don't know if I actually went anywhere with that long diatribe, but I tried.
Midori?
I feel like something that the author was trying to convey through some of their talk about the whole soul mark thing was that destiny is up for interpretation. Just like in the show, like your cutie mark doesn't have to define you. It can mean something different from what you think that it means. You are not bound by a one interpretation of it. And the same thing can be said about relationships. Yes, can be romantic relationships, but there can also be like friendships that are just like they aren't romantic, but they're a powerful friendship, a powerful bond that you are made better by each other, and it's just really powerful, and they're completely platonic. There are rivalries, like people that hate each other, fight with each other, would willingly kill each other. Somehow, through interacting with each other, they do grow as individuals despite that. And honestly, I was expecting that sort of black love, if you will, from the story at some point. I thought that's what they were going for, that like you could be soulmates with somebody, but that doesn't mean that you're destined to be in love with them. You're just destined to interact with them, to like be connected to them strongly somehow, and will grow as an individual through your interactions with that individual. And in that regard, I do see what you guys mean by wanting the story to be a bit longer so that it can delve into definitively what the meaning behind their relationship is. Because I don't even feel like it was necessarily romantic even by that ending scene that we had in the story. That was just a cute moment, air quotes. But it still could have very well have gone different directions after that moment. And I would have liked to have, as much as I like happy endings and everything, I would have liked to have seen them go against the definitive portrayal of destiny, especially given that the author themselves provides alternative interpretations to it in the initial chapter of the story that feels like an excerpt from a book.
Does anyone have anything to add? I'm going to take that resounding silence as a no. I will remind people that I do prefer, affirmative feedback.
No.
I remember that, yes.
Otherwise, I just assume people's mics have gone wrong or mine has gone wrong. Thank you. Thank you, Neighrator.
No.
I don't think I could add anything to that. That was quite thorough.
Yeah, there's some big Homestuck vibes here with different types of relationships. I just have to say that Black Love and Red Love is giving me way flashbacks to that fandom.
Oh no, I've been discovered.
Bum, 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 bum.
He figured out what I was using as a reference.
Wow, this podcast just has this eternal habit of finding new ways of making me feel very thick and dumb. Right. Going on to Illya's plethora of points. A couple of world-building notes is the first thing you've written down, Illya. What do you mean by that?
Well, the first one is from the little treatise at the beginning. It appears that the average hamlet contains somewhere around 400 ponies, which is interesting. I've always wondered how large Ponyville was. Another one is that the author brings up the idea of divine beings, and I'm not sure that we ever encountered that in canon. I don't recall Equestria having any sort of real religion or anything. There are a lot of physical manifestations, like this sort of hell prison that things go to, but the idea of actually having some sort of god or goddess is not really approached in canon. Anybody disagree with that?
No, it's not, and that always annoyed me. Just that throwaway line in canon of, oh, I didn't realise I was a saying. Bitch, yes you did. Carry on.
Another one is that this quiet typhoon person, I suppose some sort of a warlord or something, lived apparently over 100 years. It's another thing that I've wondered about, too, is what the lives of ponies are on the average. Apparently, you can get quite on up there. I mean, we know Celestia and Luna, but other than that, I had always assumed other ponies just had normal lifespans. So apparently it can be over 100 years. The other point I wanted to make was, okay, that's world building notes. Are we through with that? Anybody?
Unless anybody else wants to add anything.
Just want to say Granny Smith, has got to be over 100.
I was about to say that, yeah, actually. Granny Smith, her age is unknown.
Yeah, I think that was an animation error that just kind of went, what the fuck? It does bring up, I think it was Grant Morrison said, if you present any kind of cartoon or comic or fantasy world to a child, they just go, wow, this is awesome. You present it to an adult and they go, well, how does that work? How does this work? That doesn't make sense. It's like, God damn it, it's fantasy, just accept. Which I kind of get the feeling that MLP is a little bit the same way because of its target audience versus who ended up being the audience. Skywriter?
Yeah, I mean, the show plays massively fast and loose with dates and times, and I think that's a decision because the less consistency you have, the less consistency you have to adhere to. I mean, I challenge anyone to determine what exactly a moon is per se, since it's used in, I mean, by classical definitions, that's a month. But there is a lot of variance. People talk about several moons as being moons as being just an unimaginably long time. And sometimes it's more closer to, would say, is about a month. When the portal to the Equestria Girls worlds opens, they give a number of moons, but fail to, determine what that actually means for her if it won't open for many moons again. So it's just, again, the only time they're really consistent is they keep talking about 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years this, 1,000 years that, which is, very biblically just a long time ago. Well, let's not even maybe say 1,000 years. It's just very long. So, they don't really know how long it is. I mean, I saw some fake, some fake math that said that according to these various things that interpolating all these different points, Granny Smith is calculated to be over 300 years old based on this, and this that you've drawn together, which is, it's kind of funny, but it's not consistent.
Canonically, Granny Smith is 96 years old, but also in the Winter Wrap-Up episode, it says that Earthboundings have been doing it without magic for hundreds of years, which would peg, and since we know the age of Ponyville, that would put her age somewhere in the neighborhood of 300. At the end of the day, we have to remember this is a kid's show, and it just doesn't stand up to close scrutiny.
Yep, that's what
Exactly.
I'm saying.
And each episode does
analysts.
have different writers.
I like the idea that she's hundreds of years old. I'm just putting that out there.
I like the idea she's a secret alicorn. We can all have our own fanons. Right. Sorry, Illya, you were going on about... Sorry, that was massively rude of me to phrase it that way. Illya, you was talking about the world-building notes.
I think that's all for world building notes. The next point would be Cadence versus Twilight for me.
All right, then.
This is a point that always sort of bothered me, and it's just brought home more solidly in this particular story. The idea that Cadence and Luna were alone for so long, and then finally, out of nowhere, here comes Cadence. And then, and so like that's a big deal. And then, Twilight can be an alicorn too. It just seemed kind of funky to me, the way that worked.
I swear that was always a Hasbro thing, that the show creators did not want to do Cadence at all. But Hasbro kind of insisted because they wanted a pink alicorn to sell with their castle. So the showmakers made it work. I think it was Megan McCarthy. She wrote it in the way that the best way she could think of to make it work within the parameters Hasbro had given them. And I may be wrong on this one, because I know that's correct, but I may be wrong on the Twilight one, that Twilicorn happened again at a directive from Hasbro so that they could sell new Twilight Sparkle toys because the old ones weren't selling as well. So the show was always having to keep up with the toy line. And to be honest, I lived through the 80s. They did it phenomenally well. It could have gone so much worse.
Agree. In the 80s, it was like, we're going to put out... Buy our shit! It's very toyetic. There were some shows that it was just... There was like nothing to it, and they just to sell toys. Just toys.
Yeah.
Scribbler made me watch G1 and G2, I think, right? Did we? And also
Yeah,
G3?
My Little Pony Tales.
Yeah.
We never got as far as G3. We were always going to go back to it, but it was too painful.
G1 in particular, I remember though, like the animation was just absolutely horrible. Like
It was all farmed
the
out
wrong
to
voice would
Sunbow.
come out of the wrong the voice would come out of the wrong person's
The pony that
mouth
had the
sometimes.
5 legs!
The pony with the 5 legs.
There's an image, there's a sequence with ponies caught in a giant mousetrap, and suddenly you zoom in, and Lofty, this pony, has got like 3 legs underneath and 2 forelegs, and it's so fucking weird because they're all moving. And that was also the episode that gave us Zeb and the song Ha Ha Hee Hee Ho.
The animation was terrible. The songs were even worse. Somehow they had like some really random voice actors, like Megan McCarthy, the voice of like Bart Simpson, would randomly.
Peter Cullen turned up as a giant crab policeman.
Just all
I'm
these.
sorry, what?
Oh, you've got to watch G1.
To be
It's
honest,
kind of amazing.
That's one of the. That's a sequence of episodes I would fucking defend. It's called
Crab Nasties.
They were the Crab Nasties chasing after the Flurries. It was very much on the nose storytelling for an 80s kids cartoon, and it was don't judge by appearances. That the ponies encounter these horrible giant crab monsters who appear to be chasing after these small, innocent, pretty-looking flowers. And it turns out they're escaped criminals who like decimate the landscape if you let them plant themselves. And the crabs were police trying to put them back in prison. before they could destroy Ponyland.
This really does sound
sorry.
like some kind of metaphor for the writers' personal lives. Perhaps they had some crab nasties that they had to work on themselves.
That is Peter Cullen's voice. I will not hear anything besmirching Peter Cullen.
To bring us back on point, I only bring it up to mention that like the animation quality in G1 was terrible, except when they were pushing some piece of merch. What was it, the Dream Castle? The Dream Palace?
Oh god, yeah. Dream Castle and Paradise Estate.
And so
the Pony Nursery.
everything was drawn, the animation was all completely terrible, except when those particular scenes came to mind, and then they were all just like photorealistic perspective.
They were all watercolor backgrounds.
Sorry, that was the only point I wanted to make about the animation following the cartoon following the toy line.
But it's a good point because G4 could have gone so much worse because it was always following directives from Hasbro. The show lived and died by its toy line, and I think that's, I don't know. I have not watched a lot of G5, but I get the feeling it's going that way again, where it's living or dying by its toy line, and I don't know. I have my own thoughts and feelings about G5 that I won't get into. Skywriter, I saw you tapping.
Yeah, I just wanted to add G1 may have had its problems, but its premises were absolutely metal.
Oh god, yeah. I will defend G1 to my dying day. It's animated horribly, the voice acting is often bad, but it was fucking dark! Girls' cartoons were really banging in the 80s. Right, Chekhov's Raven. Illya, what does this mean?
Well, we've discussed many times before the idea that, if you bring up a gun in a story, then, that gun damn sure better have some purpose toward the end.
Yeah, it was Anton Chekhov said if you bring up a gun in Act 1, somebody better have fired it by Act 3.
And so they made a point of going out of their way to say how important this Raven person was to Celestia. And because that happened, I was expecting to see Raven again at some point, but she just brought her up and told her how important it was, and then she disappeared. So I thought that was a little odd.
You're right, actually. Yeah.
That feels like a fanon nod again. There were a lot of these, especially in early fandom. I didn't see them so much later on, and this fics from 2020, so this is after canon's ended. But in early fandom, when I consumed a lot more fanfic than I do these days, admittedly, there were always references to sort of the new hotness of the moment, and there would always be references to fanon. So things like Derpy's voice, or had just been called Derpy because she wasn't called Derpy in canon for a long time. Or things like Ditzy Doo being her daughter, or Lyra and Bonbon, Lyra being obsessed with humans and hands. What was her name? Cloud Chaser, I think it is. Being a weather pony who was just obsessed with sleeping with other ponies. And there were just these references to these other fics and these accepted ideas of fanon. And Raven kind of became part of that. And I remember there being surprise when she popped up in the opening animation of later seasons, and she's just kind of there, and she never got a voice. She never had a presence. She was just kind of always there in the background, serving a placeholder.
So there
purpose.
actually was a Raven?
Oh yes, to the point where actually I'm going to plug myself shamelessly here. In Friendship is Tragic 2, I've taken the character and I have elaborated on her a whole lot, actually. She's like the third main character. Because in canon, she has no character. She is a white pony with brown hair, a red, I think, scrunchie in her tail, and an inkwell cutie mark. And she basically serves a sort of secretarial function, I infer, because again, no voice, no character in canon. She's just a placeholder there. But we know she's called Raven Inkwell because we know that from the show Bible.
And
Midori and then Midnight.
And also, don't forget that one time that she was a unicorn.
I mean, she's always a unicorn, but she was an alicorn at one point, wasn't she?
No, she's an earth pony. Like, hell, the episode where Nightmare Moon, when Luna appeared in season 2, Raven was in that episode. She was wearing like a cape and some devil horns and a devil tail, and she She didn't have a.
She keeps swapping.
Yes,
I'm seeing all these screenshots. She keeps. I just always assumed she was a unicorn. You're right. She keeps fucking hell. That's happened multiple times. She just kept losing her horn.
She never lost it. It was prosthetic.
It's decision.
What the fuck? I'm glad I didn't see any of this before I wrote her. What the fuck?
Unicorn horns are deciduous. They're like antlers.
There we go, Fannin. We'll have that.
Strap on.
Don't tell Tempest.
Hey, moving right along.
This is creepy. Well, yeah, Chekhov's Raven. I think she was just a nod to Fannin, to be honest.
Okay.
Raven seems to have become a fan favourite in an odd sort of way. That she, doesn't have a hugely developed character. She's just always characterised as British. Don't know why that is. We come across as quite prim and proper, apparently.
You do.
Anyway, does anybody have anything to add about that one before Illya goes on to Chrysalis not being named? What?
I just wanted to say I've added Raven to a particular fic that I'm writing just for funsies, and I've also included her.
You're doing a Fannin.
I've got her. I'm doing a Fannin. I didn't know that's what it was, but I'm doing a Fannin.
Yeah, she's always going to have Ceridwen's voice in my head from now on. Right. Illya, what does this mean?
I'm sorry, what?
What does this mean on the document? Chris not named.
Okay, in the author's notes, which he referred to at the end of the story, he said Chrysalis had no actual official name until season 6. And I could swear that I actually recorded a couple of audiobooks before season 6 in which we used the name Chrysalis, especially, say, March to the Scaffold, which was a pretty early fic.
I think it might have been she wasn't called anything in the show, but I'm pretty sure the merch had a name on.
Okay.
Let's have a look.
Yeah, it was definitely merch and extra canon sources. Show staff about her named her in that, but she was not named in canon until much later.
It was the comics and the merchandise.
Yep.
Yeah,
comics.
It's she's only introduced as Queen of the Changelings in A Cantaloupe Wedding Part 2. She's named Chrysalis in the episode script, but nobody ever spoke her name aloud. In the Japanese version and iTunes and Netflix summaries, as well as in merchandise, including toys, trading cards, and various books. She's also referred to by name in subsequent episodes and in the second episode of Pony Chat, whatever that is. The Season 2 finale script describes her as Queen Chrysalis, a gangly black pegacorn with a gnarled black horn. So this is before we even had the word alicorn, because I'm pretty sure that came from Fannin. She and the other changelings were designed by Rebecca Dart. But yeah, she didn't get a name in the show, but she got it in the comics. Her name was used in the comics before the show.
Okay, so we did have her name early on, just not in the show. Okay.
Yeah. Also, I would encourage anybody to go and look at the Queen Chrysalis concept art, because, wow! She nearly had a horn that was on fire! And she looked a lot like Tempest Shadow.
Well, they usually do like to reuse concept art sometimes.
Yeah. There we go, putting that shit in the Mumble server. I'll link it in the doobly-doo for anybody listening. But have a look at that.
Okay, I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Doesn't she look like Tempest Shadow in that centre one, the number 2? And I swear on the left, the one on the left, number 1, looks a lot like the what are they called? The ones that turn into fish.
The sirens.
Sea ponies?
No, well, they are.
Not the sirens, the ones from the movie. I've forgotten what they're called.
Can I ask, is that
Hippogriffs.
the alicorn amulet on her neck?
Not quite.
So it looks like the Batman symbol.
It does look like the bat symbol. It doesn't quite look like the alicorn amulet, because the alicorn amulet's got like a picture of it looks like a unicorn on it. Not a picture, but the effigy.
True.
As fun as Chrysalis is in canon, I think all 3 of these would have been more alien-like and more insectoid.
The one
I would have preferred any of these.
The one on the right
I think
looks
the word
a
you were
little
looking
birdie.
for. I think the word you were looking for was hippocampus.
That was it, yes. Thank you.
Hippocampus?
The one on the far right's got 3 eyes. Well, it looks like the Holy Hooves are maintained in all 3, but yeah, they did reuse some of these concepts. I'm glad they got used in the end. That's really interesting. Sorry, I've completely gone off track.
Quite alright. This is intriguing.
This is usually when Neighrator chimes in and goes, should we go back to the thing?
Return of the King.
Except that the next point we've got is what else would you like to see from a fic with this premise? And I think we might already have covered that.
I think we did. I'm so sorry. I was secretly laughing at Midori because hippocampus is part of the brain.
That's what I thought.
I won't correct her. Hippocampus, according to Wikipedia, is also a horse with the front part is a horse and the back part is a fish. So
Midori's right,
right,
is what you're saying.
yes.
They were
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
Well, it's also where hippopotamuses go to college, isn't it?
oh. Dad joke for the win.
So canonically, the creatures in the film were hippogriffs who became hippocampi.
There we go.
Yes.
Everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
I was like, oh, bless your heart. It's hippocampus is part of the brain, you silly. I won't correct you though. I'm going to take the high road. No, I'm wrong.
Yeah, looking at, I don't know. I would have liked to have seen one of those other designs rather than have her just be, slightly off-model Celestia, which is what she ended up being in that first attempt.
Well, that just makes it even more appropriate that they are soul marked, because
True! Clever! Bringing it back around to the fic we're meant to be reviewing.
I try sometimes.
No, you don't. This is the first time.
That qualifies as sometimes.
Okay. Right, does anybody want to weigh in briefly on what else would you like to see from a fic with this premise that we haven't already talked about? Does anybody have any ideas of other things they would have liked to have seen with this? Because I have one, and that is, I reckon, if you're going to do the soul mark thing, commit.
Yep.
Do it properly. Expand and explore what it's about and how that bloody well affects people. That you've had, effectively, your autonomy taken away. You are destined for one person and one person only, and when you found that one person, doesn't matter who it is, they're your destiny. And quite frankly, as a polyamorous person, fuck that. Clever?
Counterpoint. I think they're very careful in the premise to suggest that it's not necessarily a romantic relationship, but that this individual is there to make you better in some way, improve you in some way.
I would agree, but we've got that aforementioned, this is labelled as a romance.
Yeah, I really would have liked to have seen some hot bug on horse action.
Holy shit, Illya! I'm trying to make a serious point, and you're bringing in the sex
Well,
jokes.
they're both horny.
Fuck off, Clever! I want it known that we got to nearly 2 hours of recording before I told anyone to fuck off.
Midnight, did I not tell you? I told you.
Oh, right.
I
Yes.
know, you did. Say.
I always tell everybody to fuck off at least once per podcast.
So many holes.
Midori, you're not helping!
We really should make a bingo card for each of our podcasts where, like,
A drinking game.
or drinking game, but
No, you die of alcohol poisoning.
it on it would be Scribbler tells everyone to fuck off.
Neighrator gets us back on
Narrator
track.
gets us back on track. Somebody,
Clever makes a dick joke.
okay, yes.
Illya says something in his deep, sonorous voice that is nonetheless so hilarious we all laugh.
Yep.
Usually about Luna or Celestia or Chrysalis'
Have we
asses.
rewritten the story yet? We usually do that.
Well, what else would you like to have seen from a fic with this premise, Illya?
Just the Idence thing. I really loved the way Skywriter explored that idea. I would have loved seeing that.
There we go. So that's another thing. Blah. That's another thing on the bingo card.
And then NP mentioned something about going to an island. That would have worked.
Yeah.
I would have liked them to somehow have tried to figure it out without going to an island. I would like to have seen, like, them having these meetings, and whereas Celestia has been very open about this with her significant people in her life, I would think Chrysalis, based on canon, doesn't really have anybody like that. So she would be sneaking off to, like, have these little rendezvous. And I would love to see back at the Hive, like what's happening when she's back there, and how does she deal with this duality that she's trying to work through. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for humor, as well as just trying to explore what you're doing with this. And aren't they romantically? I think that could sketch out for a rather large arc too.
I think that sounds like a great idea for a story, actually. A story that delves into their like secret relationship and like seeing how it develops and like the conflicts that occur along the way as they try to keep it a secret. That sounds like a wonderful story, honestly.
And Twilight would be insanely jealous. Like insanely jealous.
Oh god, I can just see this going into tsundere territory.
I just got this like hilarious mental image of like I like sad-eyed staring in at them through a window, and Chrysalis just slowly reaches over and shuts the curtain before Celestia even notices.
Or that she sticks out like her long bug tongue at her when when Celestia's not looking.
Very suggestively.
Oh yeah.
Nope, she holds up a hoof and sticks the tongue through one hole.
She gives great hole.
Goodness gracious.
God.
I think we might have reached the point of no return on this. So, hang on, does anybody want to weigh in, or are we going into final thoughts and then spinning the wheel?
Maybe Skywriter, considering their little wombat screech there.
It's not a big deal. No, this is completely off topic, and seems like me sort of like really harping on a very, very small point. But the plot mechanics of this fic require Celestia to have gotten her niece, who has been returned from an unknown place from a long time ago, and then having welcomed her back into the city. None of this being done without the two of them ever sharing a moment face to face, exchanging words, because mechanically their first words to each other have to be the soul bonded marked words or whatever. For some reason, I just couldn't get past that. I couldn't get past the fact that Celestia was just so busy that the first time she even talked to Cadence after all this time away, her adopted niece, that she'd had this massive social relationship with for many years, is that she couldn't make a moment to even say hi to her until the rehearsal. Literally the rehearsal. Like I said, it's me harping on a minor point, but it just seemed weird. It seemed, again, strange that they didn't talk to each other ever until the wedding rehearsal. It's just odd. I don't know.
Anybody got anything to add?
Not to that particular point, but when asked, what they could have done, is weirdly the thought came maybe of support group for those who have soulmates that don't know their soulmates.
Yeah,
like that could be quite interesting because they describe the fact that they don't. It's not just ponies that have them; it's other creatures. Hence why Chrysalis has one, but. That could be interesting considering Celestia hasn't known for how many years now?
But also you got the idea of like that disconnect between those who've got one thinking, should I wait for somebody I might literally never meet, given the number of people in the population? Or should I just try a relationship with somebody else and hope it works out? What happens if you've tried a relationship and then your fucking soulmate turns up?
Exactly.
Like, you've got a spouse and children and you're moving along and then suddenly, boom, I can read your soul mark. Oh, shit.
It could be quite traumatic.
Well, then they wouldn't be your soulmate.
Leave your wife, leave your kids, divorce them, leave them homeless and destitute, and be with this new person you just met, who you have no prior relationship with or no prior social obligations other than you have the same words on your ass.
Thing is, they even
then
then.
Your version, MP, the words are on the arse. They were on the necks in the story, but not in your version. No, on your butt.
Well, where else are you going to be looking?
Ass is non-literal in American terminology.
Yeah, sure.
Your ass is going to jail.
Well, it's not just your ass.
Be interesting. They cut it off and put it in jail and left the rest of you. Midnight.
Okay.
Sorry, we were talking over you.
It's okay. It's a good laugh. But yeah, just the idea because they don't necessarily have to be romantic, as stated. So you are married, you have kids, then you meet your soulmate. do you get to know them and then risk the possibility that it might be romantic? Or do the opposite and just be like, nope, I'm gone? Because according to that, the soul mark disappears when you die, right? Or is it just when you meet? I forget.
It'll disappear
appears
when
when
one
we
of them dies.
Oh, all right then.
So, yeah. I think they could have explored that possibility, especially if Celestia is leading the entire support group, because she's the only one who's had it the longest.
Actually, would it be interesting if if they were to develop this into a longer story, if there were moments where she was going to get romantic with someone and then maybe made the choice not to, always blaming that she's the ruler of Equestria, but secretly she's been holding out.
Yeah.
All good abilities of fics we could have had but didn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of good threads here, but they have not made a blanket.
Oh, I like that.
And I think that's a lovely note to leave it on, yeah. A lot of good threads, but they've not made a blanket. And yet somehow Celestia and Chrysalis is still under that not blanket. Right, okay, final thoughts.
How naughty.
Wouldn't be the same if I didn't make a stupid comment. Right, final thoughts before we spin the wheel. So final thoughts from Clever.
It's a fun fic, as we always do on this podcast. We delve in, slice and dice, and examine with very close microscopic analysis. And sometimes it can come across as, well, the fic was this, or it might come across that the fic wasn't good. This is a fun read, and I recommend it as a light, easy read that's just fun. If you hate fun, I don't know what you're doing listening to this, but if you hate fun, don't read it. And your mileage may vary when it's to the tags.
Illya?
Yeah, it was an easy read. It was a fun read. I enjoyed it very much. I think it should have been quite a bit longer.
Midnight?
Agreed. Fun read. Bit of a laugh. And, yeah, had a few things that could be developed.
Midori?
I thought that it was very nice, short, simple fic. It was enjoyable. I know that it was done for a event, so perhaps doing a follow-up story that expands on the concept a little bit more would be very fun and have a lot of potential. So I thought that it was nice, and maybe it'll get your own creativity juices going for a little story of your own.
Neighrator?
Pretty good overall. Definitely have my gripes with it. Overall, it could have been much longer, but overall pretty good. And I enjoyed the treatise at the beginning because it reads like a textbook.
And Skywriter?
It's always good to see Celestia trashing a room. Love it. No notes. So yeah, no, I had fun reading it, and yeah, it was great. And my final thought is that all you people who are into shipping Rocky with Apollo Creed are just ignoring the massive romantic tension between him and Ivan Drago. So there we go.
Oh wait, I didn't know you were a Draki shipper. Get out!
Wow.
He is like a piece of iron.
He won't go down.
I must break you. Come on.
If he dies, he dies.
Oh wow, this fic writes itself.
It does. Right, okay, I'm gonna spin the wheel now. I hope everybody brought their fic to be picked if they get chosen. So, by my count, myself, Clever, and Illya have already had our picks in this round, even though our round has been about 6 fucking months. So the people who are eligible are Midnight, Midori, Neighrator, and Skywriter. So I'll spin the wheel. Neighrator!
Yay!
Oh sweet! I choose Friendship is Optimal.
A fandom classic. Okay then.
I thought so. 40,000 words. I'm sorry, everyone. There are readings
Wow.
on YouTube.
For once, I picked the short one. He picked the long one.
That's a really good one, though.
And we could talk about AI, which is on everybody's lips lately.
Oh shit! Yeah, we can.
Yeah,
right.
very topical.
Thematic. Right. Okay. So next time we will be looking at Friendship is Optimal. Thank you very much for joining us. I have been Scribbler, and it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from Clever.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from Illya.
Have a nice time with your lives, everyone.
Goodbye from Midnight.
Keep watching that moon. Bye.
Goodbye from Midori.
Alola, Poke People.
Goodbye from Neighrator.
Bye.
And goodbye from Skywriter.
May your destinies and your life's purpose and in your love, whether prescribed by unseen forces or of your own choice, may you find them all.
Parting is such sweet sorrow.
A doxology here.
I kind of feel like there's a yang to NP's yang going on.
I feel like we usually end on a dick joke, so this is much more highbrow.
Dirt phallic symbol here.
Just somebody say penis.
Happiness.
There we go.
Wow.
It's a fallacy that we always have dick jokes.
No!
Goodbye.
No!
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.